Hello, my name is Kinsley. 5 years ago, I left town because I was told I didn't belong. Last week I came back, and my own brother had me tied to a lamppost in front of the whole town, called me the family's disgrace for asking about the will my mother left me. They erased my name from her obituary, replaced my photo in the house, rewrote the past like I never existed. But what if I told you? I found the truth they tried to bury. And what would you do if your own family turned a funeral into a stage, and you were the ghost they pretended had already died? It was 5:15 when I saw the faded green sign. Welcome to New Canaan, leaning slightly to the right like it had given up holding itself upright. I slowed down. My car's engine hummed softly, almost like it sensed the shift in air, the tightness in my chest. Everything looked the same, which somehow made it worse. The gas station on Maple still had the broken pump wrapped in yellow tape. The bakery that used to sell day-old muffins for $1 had a new name painted over the old one, but the same flaking paint told me no one really cared. This place didn't change, it just absorbed silence. I hadn't been here in 5 years. Not for holidays, not for birthdays, not even when the first call came in. Kinsley, your mom's in the hospital. I didn't come then, not because I didn't want to, because I wasn't invited. Now, I was back. Not to grieve. No, I had grieved long before she passed. I came because of a letter that arrived in my California mailbox 3 weeks ago, with handwriting I hadn't seen since the last time Mom touched my face and said, "Don't let them take from you what I couldn't protect." I parked 3 blocks from the church, not because I needed the walk, but because I didn't want to be seen pulling up out front like I belonged. Inside, the church smelled of lemon polish and old hymnals. It was packed, more than I expected. Dorian's voice echoed from the pulpit, smooth, controlled, just the right mix of grief and grace. That was his skill, making lies sound like legacy. I stood in the back. No one turned, not even the woman I had known since kindergarten, now seated 2 pews from the front, holding a tissue and whispering to another lady who once gave me cookies every Halloween. Their eyes skimmed past me like I was a shadow, or maybe they saw me and just chose not to say anything. The walls were decorated with pictures, blown up, framed, and draped in soft lighting. My mother as a teenager, my mother at her wedding, my mother with Dorian at his high school graduation, my mother holding Dorian's son, none with me, not one. I stepped closer. The slideshow playing on the projector cycled through moments I recognized, but with one small, deliberate omission, me. I wasn't blurred out. I was never there. Someone brushed past me, carrying a tray of coffee cups. "Hey, you with catering?" he asked, pointing to the side table. I blinked. "No." He tilted his head, scanning my black dress and heels. "Oh, thought you were with the service." I said nothing. He walked off. Dorian's voice carried over the music. Our mother was a pillar, strong, generous, endlessly forgiving. I wanted to laugh. He continued, "She gave everything to this town, to this family. Even when it wasn't easy, she loved fiercely." My stomach twisted. And though some of us couldn't always be around, she never stopped hoping they'd come back. The room hushed. Somewhere in the 3rd row, someone turned slightly, just enough for me to catch their glance. I didn't return it. I stood there, in that hallway of smiles and songs and soft-spoken platitudes, and felt the sharp edge of a truth I already knew. This wasn't forgetfulness. It was erasure. A complete rewriting of who belonged. My mother's voice came back to me from a hospital bed 5 years ago. "You're the only one who sees me without wanting to use me." She had said that after Dorian tried convincing her to sign over the house. Back when I still lived in town, still hoped we were a real family. I had stood by her. Stayed. Until the pressure from everyone else, the whispers, the accusations, pushed me out. Now they were burying her legacy with curated lies and tight smiles. I waited until the speech ended, until the last hymn was sung and people started milling about with plates of pound cake and cups of lemonade. I turned and walked out before anyone could make eye contact. Outside, the sky had clouded over. The wind carried the scent of the pine trees lining the edge of the church lot. I walked past a group of women chatting about how beautiful the service was. One of them, Maris, my mother's sister, caught my eye. She blinked, then looked away. My heels clicked against the pavement, but no one followed. No one called out, "Kinsley, wait!" By the time I reached my car, the clouds had broken, a weak strip of sunlight cutting across the windshield. I opened my purse and pulled out the envelope. The paper was thick, old school, handwritten, postmarked 3 weeks before Mom passed. I hadn't opened it yet. I wasn't ready before. I wasn't sure I was now. But I came back for a reason. I wasn't here to forgive. I wasn't here to cry. I wasn't here to prove anything. I was here to reclaim. The letter trembled slightly in my hands, but not from the wind or chill. It was me. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, that dull floral pattern on the comforter staring up at me like it knew something I didn't. The light from the bedside lamp flickered once, then steadied. It was quiet, except for the soft hum of the mini-fridge in the corner. I didn't need to reread the postmark. I knew exactly when it came, 3 weeks before she passed. I remembered the day it arrived like it had a scent. California sun spilling across my kitchen floor. The mail dropped onto the counter. Her handwriting on the envelope had stopped me mid-step. I hadn't opened it then. I wasn't sure I could, but now I had no choice. I slid a nail under the flap, unfolded the creamy paper inside, and started reading. "Kinsley, if you're holding this, I'm probably gone. And if you came back, it means you're braver than I was. Everything I owned, this house, the land, the savings, it's yours. I didn't leave it to Dorian. He already took what he wanted." I stopped and exhaled. I hadn't realized I was holding my breath. This isn't about money, it's about trust. You stayed when everyone else wanted me to be quiet. You saw me, not the mother they projected, not the woman they performed around. You saw me. That's why this belongs to you. There were 2 more lines I couldn't read immediately. I had to blink them clear. "I'm sorry for the years they made you feel like less. That ends now." The room spun a little, or maybe it was just the gravity of truth finding me all over again. She had left it all to me, every asset, every bit of it. But there hadn't been any mention of a will yesterday. Nothing in Dorian's tribute, nothing at the service, nothing in the lawyer's voice when he called and offered logistical closure. I folded the letter, slower this time. My heart was still beating fast, but now it had direction. Not just anger, not grief, intention. Morning turned into mid-morning. I dressed without music, pulled my hair back, put on something plain, something neutral, not armor, not a weapon, just something to say I wasn't here to make a scene, only to be heard. Dorian's estate was 10 minutes from the motel. The front gate recognized my license plate, or maybe the camera did. Either way, it opened. Of course he hadn't changed the security code. Of course he believed I'd never come back. The house looked the same, but polished, sharper. Everything had a gleam, windows, garden paths, even the brass knocker on the door. The man who answered wasn't Dorian. It was someone in a tailored vest and too perfect smile. He opened the door like I was a guest at a wedding, not his employer's sister. "Miss Royce," he said, as if reading the script for a tour. "Mr. Kessler is in the library." I followed him down a hallway of marble floors and framed press clippings about Dorian's business ventures, charity galas, and city council speeches. His entire persona had been curated like a campaign. When I stepped into the library, Dorian was sitting in a leather armchair, nursing a tumbler of something amber. It was 11 a.m. He didn't stand. "Well," he said, "I wondered when you'd drop in." I didn't sit. "I need to talk." "Talk away," he said. "Though I should warn you, I'm having people over soon. We're honoring Mom again this evening." This is about her will. His smile didn't flicker. "Ah, that. I have a letter from her. Dated. Signed." He sipped from his glass, then set it down. "Kinsley, you were always Mom's little fantasy, her project. She wrote a lot of things toward the end. Don't do that." He tilted his head. "Do what?" "Paint her as unstable." "I'm not painting. I'm describing. She had good days, sure, but she wasn't consistent. Toward the end, she couldn't tell you if it was Wednesday or her wedding day." I stared at him. He was smooth, unbothered, like this whole thing had been rehearsed. She knew exactly what she was doing when she signed that letter, I said. There was no will filed, Kinsley. Not with the lawyer you chose. He stood now, walked toward the window, then turned back. This family needs peace. We just buried our mother. Your return is complicated. I felt my jaw clench. Peace built on theft isn't peace. It's silence dressed up. He chuckled. You've got the same drama Mom used to have. So romantic, so tragic. That was enough. I left without another word. The man in the vest didn't even blink as I walked past him. Later that evening, Dorian hosted dinner. I wasn't invited, of course, but I heard about it from someone who still talked to me in whispers, a community member. She texted, "You won't believe what he said tonight." According to her, Dorian raised a toast in front of a room of his so-called friends and said, "It's hard to say this, but Mom's health really declined after Kinsley disappeared. She was never the same." Someone asked if I ever visited. He replied, "She left while our mother was in the hospital." The lie settled like dust. In front of wine glasses and catered trays, my character was vacuumed out of the room. Back at the motel, I sat at the edge of the bed again, staring at my laptop. I opened it, logged into the legal portal I hadn't used since law school. I still remembered how to search estate statutes in South Carolina. There it was, requirements for a valid will, signatures, witnesses, no mention of Dorian, no clause allowing a sibling to override the named heir. I didn't know if what I had was bulletproof, but it was real, and real was enough to start. Outside, the sun dipped lower. The light in the parking lot turned orange, then gold, then gone. I looked at my mother's letter again, then at the screen. I whispered to the empty room, to the memory of her voice, to the man who thought he could write me out of the truth. Let's see what he buried along with her. They weren't built for truth. That line from Mom's old email clung to me like static the entire drive to the Historical Society. It had been sitting in my inbox for years, buried under confirmations, newsletters, and other emails I never opened. But reading it again last night, it was like she knew. She knew this family would rewrite everything once she was gone. She just didn't know how far they'd go. The morning was quiet, almost too quiet for spring. Clouds hung low but didn't threaten rain. The air carried that sticky scent of blooming azaleas, mixed with the faint trace of old wood smoke from a nearby chimney. New Canaan always smelled like a memory I couldn't trust. I parked a block away from the Historical Society and walked the rest of the way. It wasn't out of caution, it was habit. Growing up here, I'd learned early that proximity to the truth didn't guarantee access. Sometimes it just meant being watched harder. The woman at the front desk gave me a polite smile when I stepped inside. I introduced myself as Kinsley Royce, and her eyes shifted, just slightly, before she waved me toward the back. "The Royce family legacy is in the main hall," she said. "It's been getting a lot of attention lately." Of course it had. The room wasn't large, but it had been curated with care. Framed photos, old newspaper articles, heirlooms behind glass. I could tell Dorian had a hand in the design. Every label was typed in the same serif font he used for his business brochures. Clean, authoritative, final. I walked slowly, letting my eyes adjust to the lighting, letting my mind brace. There was my mother, young and radiant in black and white portraits. There she was again, mid-30s, holding Dorian as a baby. Newspaper clippings of her charity events, her community awards, then Dorian's school achievements, his military commendation, his real estate milestones. There was even a full panel titled, "The Heir Who Stayed." My feet stopped cold. The plaque read, "Dorian Kessler, the only son of Delilah Royce, who carried on her legacy with dignity and perseverance." No mention of a daughter, not even a shadow of my name. I moved down the wall, scanning every photo. I wasn't in a single one. Not in birthday shots, not in family barbecues, not in the image of the hospital room where Mom was receiving a community service award while holding Dorian's son in her lap. I had taken that photo. I remembered adjusting the lighting because the overhead glare was too harsh, but I wasn't there. Not even a photo courtesy of. This wasn't forgetting. This wasn't a mistake. It was a purge. I turned back to the front desk and asked calmly, "Who submitted the materials for the Royce exhibit?" The woman blinked. I'm sorry? The photos, the documents, who curated them? She checked a small folder beneath the desk. All materials were provided by Dorian Kessler's office. Thank you. I left before she could say anything else. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. The air outside was enough to keep my throat tight. I drove straight to Dorian's house, though I didn't call ahead. I didn't care whether he was home or not. I told the gate speaker I was there to retrieve photo albums, and someone buzzed me in without hesitation. Inside, the same man in the tailored vest greeted me. I told him I wanted to look through the library for something personal. He nodded like he didn't get paid enough to care. The library smelled of cedar and ego. I ran my fingers along the shelves, each row filled with books Dorian hadn't read but wanted people to think he had. I turned toward the far corner where a display case stood, glass polished, contents perfectly arranged. At the center was a velvet stand holding a necklace, gold, delicate, with a tiny ruby heart. I stopped breathing. The placard beneath it read, Delilah's final birthday gift to her daughter-in-law, Meredith Kessler. That was a lie. I knew it because I had helped Mom pick it out. I had been there the day she found it in Charleston, tucked inside a little antique shop she used to call her escape. I remembered the handwritten note she placed with it. To the one who stayed when staying wasn't easy. She wrote that for me. I leaned closer and saw it, my initials, faint but unmistakable, engraved on the clasp, KR. And just like that, something shifted inside me. Not anger, not even heartbreak. Something older. A quiet rage made from every time I'd swallowed my own name to keep the family peace. I left without saying a word. The staff didn't stop me. Maybe they knew better, or maybe they didn't care. That evening I sat cross-legged on the motel bed, my laptop balanced on a pillow. I opened a private drive I hadn't accessed in years, Mom's old shared folder from when she was managing her estate documents and needed help with digital records. She had forgotten the password once. I hadn't. It opened. Dozens of emails and drafts flooded the screen, but one caught my eye. Subject, just in case. It was from 2 years ago. I clicked. Kinsley, the message began. If something happens and I'm not able to speak for myself, please don't believe what they tell you. This house, these photos, these plaques, they weren't built for truth. They were built to keep people like you quiet. She had attached a PDF labeled Original Will D. Royce. I opened it. There it was. Signed, notarized, dated. And my name in bold type as sole beneficiary. My mother hadn't just left me something. She had left me proof. Now I just needed the world to see it. The words echoed in my chest long after I powered down the screen. Now I'm writing the ending. I had whispered it more to myself than to Dorian, but that didn't make it any less true. For the first time since stepping foot back in New Canaan, I wasn't questioning my place. I was claiming it. And I wasn't waiting for permission. The motel clock read just past 10:30 p.m. When I grabbed my keys again, the room still smelled like faded detergent and something vaguely citrus from the cheap cleaning spray they used. I slipped on my jacket, slid the folded copy of Mom's letter into my back pocket, and walked out into the cool night air. The streets were quiet, no cars on the road, just the hum of porch lights buzzing across town. I didn't need a GPS to find my way. Some memories didn't fade, no matter how badly you wanted them to. 15 minutes later, I turned off the main road and pulled into the gravel lot beside an old storage facility. The office lights were off, but I knew where the keypad was. Same place it had always been, mounted on the right-hand wall beneath the faded sign that read, Safe Keep Storage. The number was still her birthday. She never changed it, even after I told her it was too obvious. I typed it in. The gate rattled, hesitated, then rolled open. Unit B14. We kept everything there. Old Christmas decorations, boxes of high school report cards, ballet shoes I hadn't worn since I was 15. I found the right unit, pulled the latch, and lifted the door. The smell hit me first. Cardboard, dust, and something faintly floral, lavender. She used to tuck dried lavender into every box. I switched on the light bulb hanging from the ceiling, its glow dim and yellowed. A stack of boxes lined the back wall. I started with the one marked KR. It was heavier than I remembered. Inside, beneath old journals and a photo album wrapped in blue ribbon, was a flat envelope sealed in wax. My name was written across the front in her handwriting, still smooth, still deliberate. For when she's ready to return. My fingers shook slightly as I broke the seal. Inside was a will, legally formatted, notarized, dated exactly 2 months before her stroke. And there it was, in black and white. The Royce estate, the land, the assets, and any remaining trust, all designated to me. Not Dorian, not the town. Me. I sat down on the edge of a nearby plastic tub, pressing the paper against my knees to keep it steady. I wasn't crying, not yet, but my whole body felt full, like I'd been holding something in for years and didn't realize how heavy it had gotten until this moment. I closed the envelope gently and returned it to the folder. Before I could stand, I heard gravel shift behind me. I turned. A woman stood near the unit's opening, mid-60s, coat buttoned, gray hair tucked neatly under a scarf. I recognized her instantly. Carmen Bellamy. Mom's lawyer. She hadn't aged much since the last time I saw her, but her eyes, they were different now. Tired. Maybe guilty. I figured you'd find it eventually, she said softly. What are you doing here? I asked. I check this lot on occasion, she replied. Out of habit. Your mother gave me a key before she passed. You knew this was here? She nodded, then stepped further into the unit. I was told to destroy that copy, she said. I didn't. I looked at her, trying to read her face. Who told you to destroy it? Carmen hesitated, then let out a quiet breath. Your brother, of course. He said no one would believe you, she continued. He told me keeping the old version, the one naming him, would avoid conflict. Did he threaten you? No. He was too clever for that. He offered me comfort. Said I could retire early, that he'd fund my nonprofit. He painted it like a favor, like protecting a grieving family. And you didn't say anything? I'm saying something now. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. She handed it to me without another word. It's all there. The will, the signed affidavit, and a video of your mother signing it. I held the drive in my palm. It was so small, but it felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Why now? I asked. Carmen gave a sad smile. Because she trusted me, and I broke that trust. But you didn't. You came back. We stood in silence for a moment before I nodded. Thank you. She stepped out into the night without another word. I watched her go, then closed the unit and locked it behind me. By the time I returned to the motel, it was nearly midnight. The parking lot was still empty. The clerk had gone home. I moved quietly, careful not to wake the guest in the room next door. I didn't sleep. And not because I couldn't, but because I was already awake in a different way. By sunrise, I was dressed and in my car, headed to Dorian's estate. The same gates opened for me again. The same man in the same vest opened the door. Your brother's in the sunroom, he said, like we were still pretending civility. I walked through the house, past the photo walls that had been scrubbed of me. I didn't stop until I reached the sunroom, where Dorian sat sipping coffee and thumbing through his phone like nothing in the world could touch him. He looked up, smiled. Well, you're certainly persistent. I pulled the printed will from my bag and placed it on the table in front of him. He didn't reach for it, just raised an eyebrow. What's this supposed to be? You know what it is? He skimmed it finally, expression unreadable. She was already declining when this was signed. I stepped closer. She knew exactly what she was doing. He set the paper down. This doesn't matter. You think anyone in this town will believe it? I've been the one holding this family together. You were gone. I stared at him. Really looked at him. The carefully pressed shirt, the expensive watch, the calculated posture. All of it was armor, and none of it was truth. You erased me from her story, I said. Now I'm writing the ending. I turned and walked out before he could reply. This time, I didn't wait for him to call after me. I barely slept the night I handed Dorian the will, not because I was anxious. No, that had passed, but because adrenaline had become the thing moving through my veins. My body was exhausted, but my mind kept circling the same point. This is no longer a quiet war. It's public now, and once the truth cracks open, it doesn't seal back up. By 7:30 the next morning, I was seated in a corner booth at Millie's Cafe, the only place in town that still served drip coffee in real ceramic mugs. I watched the regulars, mail carriers, retired school teachers, the occasional sheriff's deputy, move through their routines as if the town hadn't chosen to forget me, as if I didn't just blow a hole through the polished version of our family legacy that Dorian had been selling them for years. Jess Wynne slid into the booth across from me. She was younger than I'd realized, maybe 23, with a backpack slung over one shoulder and a camera bag looped around the other. She ordered black coffee before even greeting me. "You've stirred up more attention in 3 days than the town's seen in 3 years, she said, setting her phone between us. "That wasn't the goal," I replied. "But it's working." Jess opened her phone and pulled up her vlog feed. The video she'd posted of the Royce Legacy exhibit, where my name was suspiciously missing, had hit 30,000 views overnight. People weren't just watching, they were commenting. Some were from locals, some were strangers. But the tone had shifted. "She can't possibly be making this up," one said. "Why would anyone erase a daughter from history unless they had something to hide?" Read another. Jess looked up. "You ready for this to get even bigger?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Let's do it." We headed across the street to the town library, where the monthly Women in Business event was being held. I hadn't signed up to speak. This wasn't part of some master plan, but one of the coordinators recognized my last name and offered me the floor, perhaps out of guilt, perhaps curiosity. I stood behind the podium, the microphone set a little too low, and faced a room of mostly older women sipping from white paper cups. Some of them looked vaguely familiar. One woman near the front twisted a napkin in her lap when I said my name. "I know most of you probably remember me," I began, "but not in the way I want to be remembered." The room fell quiet. "I left this town 5 years ago after being pushed out of my own family. I came back to bury my mother, and instead found that I had been buried too." A few shifted in their chairs. My name was removed from her obituary. I was excluded from her memorial. And when I walked into the exhibit honoring her life, I wasn't even a footnote. Someone whispered, "That's not right." "What most of you don't know," I continued, "is that I'm the founder and CEO of a biotech company based in San Diego. We've developed diagnostic tools used in over 80 hospitals nationwide. I don't say that to impress you. I say it because my brothers spent the last 5 years telling everyone I was the one who failed this family." A woman in the back let out a soft, "Well, I'll be—" "This isn't about money," I added, my voice steady. "It's about truth, about the rewriting of legacy to fit the ego of one man. I have proof, legal, signed, and witnessed, that my mother left everything to me. And yet, I've been painted as the shameful ghost." Silence. Then a voice from the side of the room, tentative but clear. "She doesn't look like someone who needs a handout." I smiled gently. "That's because I never asked for one." A hush spread like a ripple. Then a rustle of movement came from the far side of the room. An older woman stood up, short, sturdy, gray hair pinned into a bun. Her name clicked in my brain before she spoke. Glenda Harlow, my mother's nurse. The woman who had stayed late without billing extra, who always smelled like vanilla and peppermint. "I was there," she said, "when Delilah signed her will. I watched her sign it with full clarity, with intent. She told me she trusted no one else but Kinsley." Gasps fluttered around the room. I looked at Glenda, unsure whether to cry or hold on to the edge of the podium. "She told me to stay quiet unless things got ugly," Glenda continued. "Well, things got ugly." I stepped down from the podium after that. I didn't need to say more. The truth didn't need a spotlight. It just needed a crack to shine through. That evening, I sat back at Millie's with Jess, who had filmed the entire event. She was uploading it when my phone rang. Dorian. I let it ring 3 times before answering. You're turning this into a circus, he said. No greeting, no attempt at pretense. It stopped being private, I replied calmly, when you paraded your version of the truth in front of a crowd. I'm warning you, Kinsley, this won't end well for you. You've already erased me from photos, from documents, from memories. What else could you possibly take? There was a pause. Then, low and deliberate, he said, This town will always believe me first. Not this time. Don't push me. I'm not pushing, I said. I'm giving you 48 hours. You come forward, you make a public statement admitting what you did. Or I go to court, the press, and everyone you've built your little empire around. He scoffed. You think you can scare me? No, I think the truth will. And with that, I ended the call. Jess looked up from her laptop. Was that him? I nodded. He's got 48 hours. She grinned. What happens if he doesn't cave? I stood up, tucked the chair back in. Then I stopped being polite. The weekend arrived faster than I expected. And just like every spring in New Canaan, it came with its own forced cheer. The annual downtown festival, music from brass bands, cheap barbecue pulled from smokers parked on every corner, booths full of church ladies selling banana bread and hand-sewn potholders. It was all exactly how I remembered it, and I hated how much that familiarity still pulled at something in me. Jess texted me that morning. Stay alert. Dorian's been on edge since the library. He's gonna try something. I had no doubt. By mid-morning, the square was crowded. Locals roamed with plastic cups of sweet tea, children darted between booths with balloons tied to their wrists, and the mayor shook hands like she wasn't aware half the town was watching this festival through a different lens this year. I walked down Main Street slowly, deliberately. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I was done performing politeness for people who had helped erase me. Eyes followed me, some curious, others cautious, a few outright hostile. I knew what they were thinking. She came back to make trouble. She should have stayed gone. Poor Dorian. I kept walking. When I reached the center of the square, just near the old courthouse steps, I saw him. Dorian. He was flanked by 2 of his colleagues, men who had grown fat off his business deals, the kind who always laughed too hard at his jokes. He spotted me, and for a moment, his face flickered with something that almost looked like fear. Then it hardened. He stepped forward, clapped his hands once, and raised his voice. Ladies and gentlemen, he called out, I'm sorry to interrupt your day of celebration, but there's something you all deserve to know. People turned. Conversations quieted. Phones came out of pockets. This woman right here, he said, pointing at me like I was some criminal being paraded, claims to be the rightful heir to our family estate. But what she won't say, what she won't tell you, is that she abandoned our mother in her final years. She left without a word, while Mom lay in a hospital bed, fighting for her life. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone near me muttered, That's not what I heard. Dorian didn't stop. She returned for one reason. Money, not to grieve, not to honor, just to take. I didn't move. One of his men stepped behind me. Before I could react, he grabbed my arms, not rough, but firm. The other pulled out a length of fabric, cheap cord from one of the festival tents. Within seconds, they dragged me toward the old lamppost in the middle of the square and tied my wrists around it. Gasps, camera shutters. But no one intervened. Here she is, Dorian announced, the disgrace of the Royce name, on full display for the town she walked away from. I stood still, not flinching, not crying. I looked at the crowd, at faces I'd known since elementary school, at parents who used to invite me over for cookouts, at teenagers filming me like I was street theater. I locked eyes with a woman from the front row at Mom's memorial. Her expression twisted in something like pity. I looked past her. Then I spoke. I've been tied once before, to this family's silence, to a version of the truth that wasn't mine. But today, you get to see who really holds the rope. My voice didn't crack. It didn't rise. It just cut through. Nobody moved for a long beat. Then, from behind the crowd, a voice called out, "Untie her!" A few more murmurs. Then silence again. I didn't wait. I twisted my wrists free slowly. The knot hadn't been tight. I stepped away from the post, brushing off my arms like I was just clearing dust. Jess met me halfway across the square. Her eyes were wide but steady. "I got all of it," she said. "I'm uploading now." By the time I returned to the motel that evening, the video had already hit 500,000 views. Jess's caption? 2025. A woman tied in public for defending her legal right. The comments came fast. "This is what gaslighting looks like in real life. She stood there like a damn queen. Where's the sheriff in this town?" My inbox filled with messages, some hateful, most supportive. Former classmates I hadn't spoken to in years sent apologies. Strangers offered legal advice. Reporters asked for interviews. I spent the next hour writing up a formal complaint: assault, defamation, intentional emotional distress. I filed it under my own name and sent a copy to the local paper. At 8 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered anyway. "This is Evelyn Drew," the voice said. "I'm a civil rights attorney. I saw the footage." "Yes," I said. "That was me." "You've got a case, a strong one." "I figured as much." She paused. "You ready to go public?" "I already am." That night, Dorian received a call from one of his city council donors. I only heard about it later, but apparently the conversation was short. "You just handed her the jury," the man told him. And he was right. By the time sunlight hit the cracked sidewalks of downtown Monday morning, everything had changed. My phone had buzzed through most of the night, but it wasn't until I stepped outside the motel room, coffee in hand, and heart still hammering from yesterday's spectacle, that I realized the town was already buzzing without me. Jess had posted the second video sometime around midnight. It wasn't just footage of me tied to the lamppost. It was the lead-up, the whole thing. You could see me trying to walk away. You could hear Dorian's voice, sharp and clear, giving the order. You could watch his two cronies move toward me like it was all scripted. By 8 a.m., the clip had exploded. On Twitter, on Facebook, on whatever local gossip forums people here use to whisper behind each other's backs. The hashtag, #JusticeForKinsley, trended for the first time just after I pulled into the courthouse parking lot. That morning, I wasn't here to fight. I was here to deliver. I walked through the lobby with a folder under my arm and the flash drive Carmen had given me secured in my purse. I was supposed to meet with one of the county clerks, an old friend of my mother's who'd requested the documents quietly. But I didn't make it more than 10 steps inside before a young woman in jeans and a WNCL4 badge ran up to me with a mic in one hand and a cameraman on her heels. "Ms. Royce? Kinsley Royce?" I paused. "I'm Rachel Lane, local affiliate," she said breathlessly. "Would you be willing to comment on what happened yesterday? The footage." I held up a hand gently. "No comment here. I'll be speaking in the public forum this afternoon." She nodded, eyes lighting up. I moved on, down the hallway, up the stairs, into the conference room where 3 people sat. 2 clerks, 1 woman from the mayor's office who looked like she hadn't slept. I handed them everything. "The original will," I said, "signed, notarized, with a video record and sworn affidavit from a third-party witness." Their eyes scanned quickly, then slowly. No one spoke for a full minute. Finally, the clerk said, "You understand this rewrites everything that's been filed under Dorian's version?" I nodded. It was always supposed to be rewritten. I left the building without waiting for another word. That afternoon, just as the church bells rang out 2 o'clock, I walked into the town's civic forum, held in the same community theater where I once played the Sugar Plum Fairy in 2nd grade. Now, the seats were full of reporters, residents, and people who didn't know what side they were supposed to be on anymore. I stood at the podium. I didn't need notes. I introduced myself simply. "My name is Kinsley Royce." Then I held up the copy of the will. I held up the notarized statement. And then Jess, seated off stage, plugged in her laptop and projected the video of my mother, in clear mind and steady voice, signing the document with Carmen standing at her side. I looked at the crowd and said only one thing. This wasn't about family. It was about control. And control ends today. I didn't need to say more. The room was hushed when I stepped down. Not stunned, more like watching a collective curtain fall. Later that evening, the real shift began. It started with a phone call Dorian didn't expect. One of his top campaign sponsors, an investor who'd given him money, land, and platform space, called to say they were pulling out. Quietly, of course, no press statements, no fuss. But gone. Then the Chamber of Commerce released a bland memo about re-evaluating local leadership. Then 3 council members issued a joint statement calling for a review of recent estate disputes in the community, without naming names, but everyone understood. And then came the school project. Jess texted me a link late that night. "You're going to want to see this." Dorian's son, Elliot, had done a class video for a 4th grade assignment. It was titled, "What Family Means to Me." In it, he sat in front of a colorful backdrop of construction paper hearts and drew pictures while he talked. "My dad tied my aunt to a pole 'cause she asked about Grandma's papers," he said casually, like describing what happened at recess. He kept drawing. The video didn't cut. "My aunt used to live here, but she left. People said bad stuff about her, but I saw the paper. Grandma wrote her name on it. My dad said it didn't count, but it looked like her name to me." That clip hit harder than anything I could have said. It spread like wildfire. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't polished. It was a child saying what he'd seen, and it unraveled Dorian faster than anything else had. 2 local newspapers picked it up. Then a parenting blog. Then a news station out of Charleston. By Tuesday morning, my name was everywhere, and not as the disgraced Royce sister, but as the woman who'd been written out and then wrote herself back in. Letters came next. Notes slid under my motel door. Emails to the anonymous account Jess had created for tips. Some were brief. "I'm sorry I believed him." Others more detailed. "He threatened to sue if I said what I saw." One was from a former employee of Dorian's. She attached copies of invoices he'd doctored, statements of assets he claimed were his before the will was even read. The truth didn't just break open, it poured. But with all of that, I knew better than to celebrate early. This was a tide turning, but tides don't drown the ones who build their homes high enough. Not yet. It was nearly sunset when I stepped through the courthouse doors. The hearing had been scheduled quietly, but word spreads faster in New Canaan than a gas leak. By the time I reached the 2nd floor, the crowd had already settled in, shoulder to shoulder, old and young, reporters and retirees, people who'd once smiled politely at Dorian on Sunday mornings, now sitting in silence, waiting to see what he'd say under oath. I didn't need to make an entrance. My presence had already shifted the air in that room. Jess sat near the back with her phone on silent, her fingers ready to clip the moment for the world outside this courthouse. She nodded once when our eyes met. I gave her a slight smile and moved toward the 1st row. The clerk nodded at me, gesturing toward an empty seat. On the other side of the room sat Dorian, posture perfect, hair combed into practiced elegance, dressed like he was still in control. But even from across the aisle, I could see the slight twitch in his jaw. His hands folded just a bit too tightly on the table. That polished exterior had started to chip, and he knew it. The mayor entered with 2 council members behind her. The lead clerk cleared his throat. "This hearing will review the legal claims submitted regarding the Royce estate and the use of community trust funds tied to the Royce family properties. No preamble, no ceremony, just facts." The first evidence presented was digital. Wire transfers, invoices, false claims of community renovations that had never happened. My name on old trust documents was nowhere to be found, but Dorian's signature appeared repeatedly next to inflated costs. Donations redirected to companies he owned under a different LLC name. Jess had pulled most of it from public archives and a disgruntled former staffer who wanted to make things right. Then came the letters. Anonymous, but telling, some typed, others handwritten. "I worked for him for 3 years. He told me to shred the will after Delilah passed. He said the town wouldn't believe a daughter who left, that Kinsley wasn't the kind of person you could trust in public." I saw her mother sign that paper. He burned the first copy in his office fireplace. The clerk read each one without pause, each sentence another crack in the armor. When it came time for Dorian to respond, he rose like he was preparing for a sermon. "This is all a vendetta," he began. "My sister and I, while we've had our differences, this isn't about justice, this is about bitterness. She left. She wasn't there. My mother died surrounded by people who stayed." His voice trembled just enough to seem human. He looked out at the crowd as if searching for a face to agree with him, but the room stayed still. He added, "What you're hearing is a campaign of resentment dressed as righteousness, and I won't be part of a show trial orchestrated by online mobs and gossip." He sat down. The silence that followed was heavier than any gavel strike. The clerk opened the floor for additional comment. And that's when Maris stood. I hadn't seen her enter. She must have slipped in during the testimony, sitting toward the back, away from the cameras. She wore a faded navy dress and carried a small purse clutched against her chest. When she began walking forward, a few heads turned. Dorian visibly stiffened. "My name is Maris Talbot," she said softly. "I was Delilah's sister, and I should have spoken up earlier." She stood in front of the microphone, her voice shaking. "I was there the day Kinsley left town. Not because she wanted to, but because she was pushed. I heard what Dorian told Delilah behind closed doors. I watched my sister cry after signing that will. She was afraid, not of death, but of being erased." She glanced toward me. "I stayed silent for years. I thought it was safer that way, but silence is a kind of lie too. And I'm not willing to lie anymore." A murmur rippled through the room, but it wasn't judgment. It was release. The clerk cleared his throat. "Counsel, do we have enough to proceed?" The mayor leaned into her mic. "In light of the evidence presented and the corroborated testimonies, we are moving to revoke Mr. Dorian Kessler's designation as community steward, effective immediately." Dorian's mouth opened, then closed. He didn't stand. He didn't protest. The councilwoman beside the mayor added, "Additionally, we recommend the removal of Mr. Kessler from the mayoral race until legal investigations conclude." A beat, then applause. It started slow, cautious, but grew into something undeniable. Not wild cheering, not celebration, just a steady rhythm of truth being recognized out loud. I didn't clap. I didn't need to. I just stood there and let it wash over me. After the hearing, I stepped outside. The air had cooled, dusk creeping in through the trees lining the courthouse lawn. People lingered on the steps, exchanging quiet words, nodding in my direction without fanfare. Maris approached me slowly. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. I looked at her, the woman who had once turned her back on me in the church hallway, the woman who had stood beside Dorian when he'd rewritten me out of my own history. "You don't need to ask for it," I said. "You told the truth. That's enough." She swallowed hard. "I should have said something a long time ago." "I know." She didn't reply. She just reached into her purse and pulled out a worn envelope. "Delilah asked me to hold this. I think it's yours now." I opened it hours later, alone, back at the motel. Inside was a photograph. Me and Mom at the beach, wind whipping through our hair, both of us laughing at something long forgotten. And a note in her handwriting. "If you're reading this, you stayed brave. I couldn't protect you from everything, but I always knew you'd protect the truth." I placed it on the nightstand next to the flash drive, the legal filings, the stack of affidavits. And I whispered, not to the room, but to her, "I finished it, Mom." 1 week later, I stood in the foyer of the Royce estate for the last time. Morning light spilled through the tall windows, brushing across the hardwood floors, the antique mirrors, and the untouched table where my mother used to sort mail every Sunday. The house was quiet now, too quiet, not because it had been abandoned, but because it had been released. My bags were already packed and loaded into the trunk of the rental car. There wasn't much to take. A few old letters, the photo from the beach, some personal things I'd kept in boxes she never unpacked after I left. Everything else I was leaving behind. The folder with the deed sat open on the counter. I had signed the transfer forms just a few hours earlier. It was going to a women's shelter in Columbia, one with a waiting list that ran months long and not enough safe beds to go around. Mom's final request hadn't come in a will or a legal document. It was scribbled on the back of an envelope I found tucked into her cookbook. "Let this house be safe for someone else someday." She hadn't meant safe in the literal sense. She'd meant free from silence, from shame, from men who turned family into performance. I walked the halls one last time, touched the wood banister on the staircase where I'd once snuck down at midnight to steal Oreos from the kitchen. Paused in the sunroom where Dorian had once bragged about closing his first deal. I stood at the window and let myself take in what I was letting go of. Not the house, not the land, the version of myself I'd tried to become just to be let back in. It was almost noon when I stepped outside. The humidity had crept up, heavy and sweet, and the garden was full of bees bouncing between the roses. The movers had come and gone. All that remained was memory. I drove into town slower than usual, taking turns through streets that used to feel like mazes when I was 10. A few familiar faces waved from their porches. One woman nodded politely and looked away. I didn't expect parades, I didn't need reconciliation, but something had shifted. At the center of the town square, the lamppost still stood. I parked and walked over to it. There was a small group of teens sitting on the courthouse steps across the way, heads bent toward their phones, barely registering me. A man was sweeping the sidewalk. The breeze picked up just enough to scatter a few leaves. I reached out and ran my fingers along the cool metal. That was when I saw it. Etched into the base, small but clear, were the words, "This is where dignity rose again." I didn't know who had carved it. Maybe Jess, maybe someone I'd never spoken to. But it didn't matter. I turned and walked back to the car. One more stop, then I'd be done. At the edge of town, tucked into the back of a drawer in Mom's old sewing desk, I'd found a second envelope last week. I hadn't opened it right away. I think some part of me wasn't ready, not until now. I pulled off the road near the creek where she used to take me for walks, sat on the hood of the car, opened the envelope. Inside was a short note, handwritten, like always. "You were never meant to fight for love. You were born to live in it. If they couldn't see that, I'm sorry." I cried, not out of anger, not from grief, but something else entirely, release. I let the tears come because this wasn't pain anymore. It was clarity. And all those years I'd spent wondering if leaving had been betrayal, this told me it was survival. She knew. She had always known. I folded the letter and placed it back into the envelope. And then I did something I hadn't allowed myself to do in years. I sat there and laughed. Not a loud laugh, just a small one, under my breath. It felt foreign at first, like stretching a part of myself I forgot was still there. But it grew. I stayed there until the sun shifted, then got back in the car and drove to the edge of town. I didn't stop by Dorian's. I didn't need an apology. Some debts aren't owed to me. They're owed to themselves. And if he ever came looking for forgiveness, he'd have to find it in the mirror, not my voice. As the trees thinned and the highway widened, I looked down at the passenger seat. The photo of me and Mom at the beach sat tucked inside the visor. She hadn't left me a house. She left me my voice back. And this time, I wasn't giving it up for anyone. And sometimes the loudest battles are fought in silence, and the deepest wounds come from the people we once trusted the most. Kinsley's story reminds us that reclaiming your voice, no matter how long it's been stolen, is an act of courage. What would you do if your own family tried to write you out of your story? If this resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful family stories, real-life betrayals, and unforgettable moments of quiet revenge. Let us know in the comments. Have you ever been the disgrace who finally told the truth?